California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Howser, and here we are in beautiful and historic San Francisco. You know, I don't think there's any city in California that cares as much about its history as San Francisco. Everywhere you go when you're here, you're surrounded by it. For example, right now we're standing in front of San Francisco City Hall. That building was built back in 1915 to replace the building that was destroyed in the great earthquake and fire of 1906. And that building is so significant architecturally and historically, it's been declared a national landmark. No doubt about it, San Franciscans love their history. But as much as they love their history, every once in a while, they let one get away. And that's what this adventure is all about. We're going in search of some of San Francisco's lost treasures. And if you're curious as to where we're going to go and what lost treasures we're talking about, well, as always, you're invited to come on along with us as we continue our search together for California's gold. Our first stop in search of San Francisco's missing treasures brings us here to Market Street in downtown San Francisco. Our guide this morning, your name is?
Al Suffel, member of the American Theater Organ Society.
Okay, and you know why we're here. We're in search of missing treasures, and there used to be a San Francisco treasure located right here.
Exactly. The greatest architectural treasure in San Francisco is standing right behind us. If you were here June the 28th, 1929, you could turn around and you would look up, and you would look way up and you would see a giant marquee that said Fox Theater. This was the crown jewel of the William Fox theater chain. It was supposed to be the finest theater ever made. It was decorated with real antiques from Europe. It was a beautiful theater. It was done in a French Renaissance style, Art Deco in some places, and Rococo and Baroque in others. It was just beautiful.
I've seen pictures of it, and you've told me that from the night it opened, everything was grand about this theater.
If we had a time machine and we could go back to June the 28th, 1929, and we were standing here, we would see a crowd of about 50,000 people forming to see the opening of this theater. This was a San Francisco landmark, meant to stay for 1,000 years. It was built like a tank. It was beautiful. The architectural firm with Thomas Lamb built the theater. It took him 3 years to design the theater.
Now, the pictures, I don't even know whether they do it justice, but the ones I've seen, everything is gilded and gold and chandeliers and carpets and drapes. I mean, it was like literally going into a palace.
Well, this theater was built with $5 million to start with, and it went to $8 million that they had cost overruns. It was really quite the movie palace. Your average movie palace in 1929 was $1 million movie palace. This was the deluxe of the deluxe.
Did San Francisco know from the beginning exactly how special this theater was?
Oh, yes, they did. Mayor Sonny Jim Rolfe showed up, and he was here at every step of the process to make sure that his city had the best movie palace in the world.
And how did it compare to other movie palaces around the world?
It was a standard by which all others were compared by. There are several historical societies dealing with architecture and architecture of movie palaces and theaters, and they hold the Fox Theater as the finest and the best of the best.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, it opened in 1928.
1929.
1929, and another part of that theater was the grand old organ, the huge Wurlitzer that performed, I guess, before and after all the movie performances.
Yes, and even though it was an organ that was out of the silent movie era, and the movies weren't really silent, the organs were designed to accompany movies, complete with sound effects. This organ was a very special organ. To that time, it was the largest theatrical organ built by Wurlitzer Company, and it was the finest company that produced organs, was Wurlitzer. So what you had was the building had lots of money thrown into it, and you had the finest organ put into it to make sure that you had the best of the best.
Well, as grand as the old Fox Theater was here in San Francisco, I don't see it around here today. What happened to it?
This is the site of one of San Francisco's worst tragedies, architectural tragedies. There was a massive fight. The city was not ready yet for a performing arts center, did not really look to the future at that point in the early 60s, and unfortunately, like so many great things, it was just lost.
Lost, and I'm sure there was a big battle.
Oh,
Didn't all you theater people and preservationists and all get up in arms over this thing?
There was a battle led by a man by the name of Jeff Herschel, and he put together a group of about 8,000 people. We tried to get the theater saved. It was put on the ballot in San Francisco, and unfortunately, the public spirit and the public will to save this architectural treasure just didn't exist at that time.
So the grand old Fox Theater was lost, and it must just bring tears to your eyes to remember those days when they tore the place down.
It does. Even today, it's hard to believe that such a fantastic piece of architecture is gone. As they were tearing it down, we would show up, people who really loved the place, and we would watch the progress as all the beauty was slowly turned to dust.
And I have a feeling that San Franciscans now realize what they have lost. They probably wouldn't make this same mistake again, would they?
Well, those of us who are native San Franciscans, we really know what was lost, but I'm afraid to say that the majority of the city is a new city, and it's hard for people here who are young to really understand because they never saw it.
Remember exactly how grand it was.
They don't remember, they're too young.
Well, the old Fox Theater is gone. There's not a trace of it here today, but a part of the old Fox Theater survives, and that's where we're going now. We're going to leave San Francisco and find part of the old Fox Theater. It's still around. And here we are in Hollywood, right on Hollywood Boulevard to be exact. We have come here in search of something that got away from the old Fox Theater in San Francisco before it was torn down. And we have heard from our very reliable sources that what we're looking for is inside this beautiful old theater. And here we are inside this beautiful masterpiece of a theater, the El Capitan. I'm standing with Ed Collins, who's the general manager. Ed, this theater in itself has a wonderful history to it.
Sure does, Huell. The El Capitan Theater was one of 3 grand movie palaces on Hollywood Boulevard. It opened in 1926 as a live stage theater. And all of the greats, Clark Gable, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Mary Pickford, all appeared on the live stage of the El Capitan Theater because they knew that the movie moguls, producers, and directors all attended shows here.
So this was an honest-to-goodness Hollywood movie palace in itself.
It was an honest-to-goodness palace, but for the first 15 years of its life, it was a live stage theater. It became a movie theater in 1941 when Orson Welles hosted the world premiere of Citizen Kane here.
Well, it's a wonderful theater today because it has been lovingly restored by Disney. It's now owned and operated by Disney, and it's back to its former glory. And you know why we're here. We are in search of something that we heard is here that used to be in San Francisco. Do you know what we're talking about?
I sure do, Huell. We have a jewel in our theater, which we'd like to show you this morning. It's in our auditorium. It's a magnificent piece of California history.
And it's missing from San Francisco, but it's here, in Hollywood?
It originally was installed in San Francisco, and it moved to Hollywood, and we refurbished and put it in the El Capitan Theater in 1998.
Don't give it away, because we're building up the suspense. Our stage manager, Holly, you're here. You're all ready to go. We've been rehearsing this. This is a big moment in our adventure. It's time to cue what is here in the El Capitan. And there it is, right there, the big F on the side of the Wurlitzer for the Fox Theater. We're standing here now with Rob Richards. We really enjoyed your performance. You are technically and officially the house organist here, and you were playing on this grand organ from the Fox Theater in San Francisco. Tell us a little bit about the importance and the significance of this particular Wurlitzer.
Well, this pipe organ is one of 5 that were built by the Wurlitzer Company in North Tonawanda, New York. There are only 4 that survive today, and we're delighted that we have the San Francisco Fox organ here in Hollywood. It seems very appropriate.
Now, when it was in San Francisco, it was a showpiece in the Fox, and it has become that here, hasn't it?
Absolutely. This is, I would say, arguably one of the 2 or 3 most important theater organs ever built. And concerts that were done by George Wright, a very famous and talented organist in San Francisco, really started the entire modern theater organ movement, the concert circuit, and a whole bunch of recording artists that are now making their living as musicians today.
So do you feel a little nostalgia, a little sense of continuation when you play on this organ now in Hollywood?
Well, there is that, but even better, there's a sense of a whole new adventure with the organ playing for a new generation of theater goers. There are people falling in love with the Wurlitzer pipe organ that would never have heard it otherwise, so it's winning a whole new legion of fans.
And it's kind of fun to be in the audience, and suddenly you hear the music, and then this thing kind of rises up. That was kind of part of the theatrics of early day movie going, wasn't it?
Absolutely, there's no question about it. I mean, this was the most spectacular sound in its day. People listened to little 78 RPM records on their Victrolas and then would go to the theater and hear this amazing room-filling sound. There was nothing like it.
All right, now it looks beautiful here. Come on in, fellas, because we got 2 guys here standing over to the side who are kind of, come on in close to this thing, kind of responsible for keeping this mighty Wurlitzer. I was going to say in tune, but there's another word for it. You got to keep everything going.
Well, in tune and repaired, because it's a mechanical instrument and it has thousands of moving parts, and it's been lovingly restored, but it is 74 years old and things do go wrong. So every week we come down here and see that it is note perfect.
Is it in good shape?
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Was it built well when it was built? Obviously it was.
It was built very well, yes.
Wurlitzers were the finest pipe organ available for theater work and the most expensive.
And where does this rank in the hierarchy of theater organs?
With the exception of Radio City Music Hall, this was the largest instrument Wurlitzer built, and it was their own design and certainly a fine organ.
And you got to feel a sense of pride when you hear it fill the theater like it does.
Well, the sounds that were in it in the Fox are still in it, and it's amazing to sit and play it and listen and hear those same sounds today that were recorded 50 years ago.
Did you ever hear it in the Fox Theater?
No, I never heard it in the Fox. There are recordings of it in the Fox, but I have friends who heard it in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they still love this organ.
What kind of stories did they tell about that?
Oh, well, going to the George Wright concerts at midnight, Fox could pull 5,000 people into the Fox at midnight for a concert on this organ.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. So you do have big shoes to fill.
Oh, absolutely. George Wright was such a draw that as the theater was planned for demolition, they actually had a whole series of farewell to the Fox concerts. And it's true, there were 5,000 people that would fill the theater on several occasions saying goodbye to this wonderful pipe organ.
Wow. Well, San Francisco's loss is Hollywood's gain. Thank you for inviting us down here. You got to be proud of having this in the theater.
We're very proud. It's the heart of our theater, Huell.
Well, it's the heart and it's probably the soul, too, in a way, isn't it?
It is. The pipe organ brings a personality to this theater.
Okay, we're back in San Francisco in search of another missing San Francisco treasure, one of those treasures that San Francisco let get away. And we're standing here with Joe Wyman. And Joe, we're standing out here looking at the bay. Things are pretty quiet here now, but if we'd been standing here, 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, things would have looked a little different out here.
Sure would. You would have a huge number of boats coming and going from the back of the ferry building and even as far north as Pier 3.
Ferry boats?
Ferry boats.
Now, they would have started right over here at the old ferry building here,
right.
Port of San Francisco, and headed out across the bay for what reason?
Primarily shuttling passengers from the ends of the rail lines within East Bay over here to San Francisco, bringing both passengers and goods and services.
So there were a lot of big ferry boats operating here all through the late 1800s and the first part of the last century.
That's right. They brought both passengers and their vehicles and the mail.
Now, you know about those old boats because you own one of them.
Yes, we do. We own the ferry boat Santa Rosa, tied up here at Pier 3. She's a historic ferry boat, one of the last remaining ones on San Francisco Bay.
So she's a historic landmark now?
Yes, she is. She's on the California list.
And there was another ferry boat, the Berkeley, which I think by the pictures looks a little bit bigger than yours. Do you know whether they were about the same size?
About the same size. I think the Berkeley is slightly longer and wider. The Santa Rosa is 260 foot long and 66 feet wide, and I believe the Berkeley is almost 300 feet long.
The Berkeley was launched in 1898 and operated back and forth across the bay to Oakland until 1958. It was a very luxurious ferry boat, and it, along with the other ferry boats, played a big role in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake.
That's right. The ferry building was one of the few buildings that survived the fire after the earthquake, and the boats were used to shuttle passengers away from the city and to bring in emergency relief and aid.
So they did their part during the earthquake.
They sure did.
And they were very much a part of the history of San Francisco and of the San Francisco waterfront. The Berkeley is no longer out here on the bay. It was one of those wonderful treasures that San Francisco let get away. But we know where it is, and that's where we're going right now. Well, here we are in San Diego. We're looking out across the San Diego Bay. That's Coronado Island off in the distance. That's the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier off there. As big and as beautiful as the Nimitz is, we are not here to visit the Nimitz. We're here because we have found the Berkeley. And there she is, right here in San Diego. Gentlemen, that deserves some explanation. Come on over. You all are with the San Diego Maritime Museum.
That's correct.
Tell us what in the world the Berkeley is doing in San Diego.
Well, she's doing great in San Diego. But the reason why she's here is because in 1973, or until then, our museum really only had one ship. And one ship really wasn't enough to tell the story of San Diego's maritime history and California's maritime history. So our museum went on a wide search for a ship because we wanted a ship rather than a building. And they looked at a lot of ships, and the Berkeley ended up winning that contest. She was the best vessel to use.
Berkeley was available. What, was she going to be scrapped?
That's likely the end result. Yeah, she probably would have been. At the time, she was a trade fair in Sausalito, kind of a flea market, and that was kind of the last stop to oblivion. And
so wait a minute. When she had been taken out of service as a ferry boat in San Francisco, she had been used in Sausalito as a what?
As a trade fair. There were like dime store merchandise and curiosities and so on. And she had actually ended that job too. That career ended, and she became a home for pigeons, thousands of pigeons. So clearly, the end was in sight when the museum acquired her.
So she wasn't in very good shape when you found her and towed her down here.
Well, she's full of pigeon droppings, and there's lots and lots of decay, so it's been a steady process of restoring her for decades.
And how hard was it to get her down here?
Well, she had to be dry docked, and then for the first time, she's a fine vessel, but she was never designed for the open ocean, so she had to be towed 500 miles down the coast from San Francisco to San Diego, and that was the first time she'd ever been in the open sea.
All right, we want to get on board because we can do this. This is one of the centerpieces of the San Diego Maritime Museum, but before we do anything, Mark wanted to be sure that the good people of San Francisco knew something.
There was no theft involved here. If you all are familiar, the San Francisco National Historic Park, National Maritime Historic Park, has the ferryboat Eureka, and they had a choice back in the 1950s and 60s. Their director had to choose between preserving the Eureka or the Berkeley, and they actually decided on the Eureka. And so the Berkeley remained available, and they couldn't preserve both vessels up there, so we were very lucky to be able to get her.
So the San Francisco Maritime Museum has preserved the Eureka, which is a sister vessel to the Berkeley. San Diego has the Berkeley, and you didn't get her by hook or crook. You got her fair and square.
And square, that's right.
All right, let's get a look right now, as one last look, because we're getting ready to go on board and visit the Berkeley. And a fine-looking ship she is, right here in San Diego. Okay, we are inside the Berkeley, and Mark, you were telling me this is called the...
This was the passenger deck, or the ladies' deck, and originally this is a ferry for people going back and forth to catch the train in Oakland from San Francisco. And you could, if you didn't have a tie on, you gentlemen were stuck downstairs, but if you had a tie, you could join the ladies up here.
Really?
That's right.
Now this is all original?
It's all original. We've restored them, of course, but these are all original seats.
Because these are absolutely, look at the material here. The wood is just spectacular.
Well, thank you on behalf of our painters. They do a good job with that.
But this place would have been packed with passengers, getting off the train. This was run by the Southern Pacific Railroad.
Mostly commuters. They were going to work to and from the city or visiting the city. They lived in Oakland or Berkeley, and this is what they took to get across the way. This was the westernmost extremity of the Southern Pacific Railroad.
Now, you had a few little things in here you wanted to show us.
Well, it's just features from her particular service. If you notice this vent down here and this vent up here, it's really a clever way of venting heat from the engine room. It's quite hot there, and you know how cold it is in San Francisco even in the summer. That made it nice and pleasant and warm here even on a cold, windy day.
So they used the heat from the boiler room to heat all the ladies and all the men wearing ties, if they were up here, to keep them warm. And you wanted to show us these windows that are just amazing and go all around the top of the deck.
Well, Leland Stanford wanted this boat to rival the opulent river boats on the Hudson River. And so this was the ritziest boat that was built on the West Coast. And he picked this pattern of stained glass windows to match the stained glass windows in his church in San Francisco. And the company that made that glass, that poured it, is still in business. And when we went to restore them a few years ago, we found that some of the blues and pinks had not been poured since 1898 when this boat was built. And so a few of the pieces we had to replace. It's the second pouring in 100 years.
It's really interesting now it's all empty like this, but to think back when it was teeming with passengers.
Packed with people. And her finest moment was probably in 1906 after the earthquake that rocked the Bay Area on April 18th. This ran day and night for days, ferrying refugees out of San Francisco over to the Oakland side.
Really?
Well, if you recall, the earthquake ruptured the mains, the gas mains, so the whole city caught on fire. And not only was it leveled in a matter of minutes, but it caught on fire. So thousands of people that had to get out from San Francisco to the outlying regions. And the crew of the Berkeley, their families lived in San Francisco, so they continued to run the ship for 24 hours without any relief, not knowing what had happened to their own families.
Wow. So this whole deck would have been full of refugees fleeing the city.
That's correct.
All the baggage they could.
Wow. Looking up at this is all original signage?
It's all original. It's been restored, but it's the original signage. This is where, of course, where the refreshment stand was.
Okay, we're ending up on I was going to say the stern, and you corrected me.
Well, actually, this was also known as the San Francisco end. It took too much time to turn a ferry boat completely around, so the one end always went into the dock. So she just went back and forth as a double-ended ship. This end on San Francisco, the other end at Oakland.
So we're on the San Francisco end.
That's right.
The Oakland end is down there.
That's correct.
And we're ending up here because you wanted to point out something about the pilot house.
Well, of course, she's got two pilot houses because you have to have one at either end of the ship when you're navigating for that end. But this particular pilot house was inhabited by Sterling Hayden, the famous actor and author who wrote the books Wanderer and Voyage, in that pilot house.
When?
Well, when she was moored in Sausalito. He would come here, and that was his working office.
Really? So there's a lot of history here.
A million stories.
The old Berkeley operated between Oakland and San Francisco for how many years?
60 years.
Until
About 57.
Then she went to Sausalito and was a flea market until
72, 73, right in there.
73.
Then you all brought her down here to San Diego, where she has been an integral part of the San Diego Maritime Museum ever since.
Of course, we think this is the best time of her life.
Absolutely. Well, this is certainly another chapter in her life. A life that started in San Francisco, but San Francisco let this one get away. But the Berkeley has found a wonderful new home here in San Diego. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our adventure in search of a couple of San Francisco's lost treasures. The Berkeley, the old ferry boat that used to go between San Francisco and Oakland out on the bay. And that grand Wurlitzer organ which used to play so wonderfully inside the old Fox Theater. Now, neither of these landmarks are still in this city. But the nice thing about it is that both of them have found new homes. They're very much alive and well, and they are both fine examples of California's gold. Goodbye, everybody.